Joie and Mandy, everything divorce related. We can put the S back in your ex appeal. Joie and Mandy, the friends you didn't know you needed on my ex appeal. An everything divorce podcast.
Hi guys, and welcome to My Ex Appeal, your everything divorce podcast. We are the friends that you didn't know you needed. Welcome back.
We're here. I know.
Yeah.
It's exciting. We're here.
And they're here too.
I love it. I know we're on TV.
Listen, we're appreciative to anybody who listens to us, even for, I'm fine with just 60 seconds. If they listen for 60 seconds, 2 minutes, that's good for me. As long as
Exactly. Exactly.
Maybe we can help, if we can help one person in 60 seconds, like that's good, right?
Oh, I think so. Because that's an impactful 60 seconds.
Yeah, I think so too.
I think so too.
On today's episode, all I know is that we're about to get into serious subjects because it is very serious. And I take it very seriously. I have kids and I want them to know. But I don't do serious very well. We all know this, I think. And so I'm concentrating on keeping my mouth shut and deciding when to open my mouth so I don't say something inappropriate.
Oh, well, okay. That makes sense.
Because that's what I do. I give inappropriate jokes where they're not needed.
And that just makes you feel better?
I'm not really sure. That should be a different episde.
Okay. Why? It will be.
Why is Joie the way she is?
That's okay. We love you the way you are. We love you the way you are. No, just to give a little bit of background, this subject came up at work. Christy was filling up her water bottle and I kind of dropped something about the podcast. I was like, oh yeah, what are you doing this week? And I was like, Joey and I are recording our podcast. Oh, you have a podcast? And then I started talking about the subject matter and she said, well, you know, that's what I do. And I was like, wait a second, what? And so that's how it came about. And just everything that she was saying organically as we were talking about it was just information that I think most people going through a divorce feel in their gut when they have kids, because you don't want, and it can happen whether you're married or divorced or single. It can happen in any family. It's not is it subjective? It's not subjective to who it picks. And we're talking about like drug addiction and depression and things like that seem to be heightened when you go through and are a child of divorce. So Chrissy's going to come on and talk to us a little bit about that, but it's heavy.
Yeah, it is heavy. And you know what's interesting too, and for anybody who didn't listen to our first episode when we introduced ourselves, is obviously, Mandy, you work in a club, right? So that's what, and when you have what most people don't know, when you have personal trainers, group fitness instructors, that a lot of times, 99% of the time, that's not their full-time job, right? That they do other things. And a lot of people think, oh, my Zumba instructor. And even if you take a Zumba class every week with this person, you don't really know them because you say, hi, thank you, and bye. And you don't realize that these people are lawyers and doctors and teachers and stay-at-home moms. Like, it runs the gamut of what they do, right? I mean, how many people have we met that are group fitness instructors and they're like, I'm a lawyer by day, and then I put on my bright leggings and I go teach a class. So,
because it's an escape. And everybody needs a healthy escape. And you're absolutely right. Like, I would have never known had I not just you started up a conversation. Right. She's amazing.
Yeah. Well, what great timing, because she just entered the waiting room. Wow.
Perfect. Well, we will let her in and we will see you guys in a minute.
I feel like we're getting good at this.
I think we are. Is she really in the waiting room?
Yeah. She really.
I was like, Joey, okay, you're going to give us a second to reset.
I was like, she's here. Ding dong. Cue the balloons. Go get her. I don't know, but this does a thumbs up. Look. How do you do the balloons?
I don't know.
Congratulations.
Balloons. Celebration. Happy birthday.
Nothing.
I don't know what happened. Divorce. No. Nope. Okay, I'll let you go let her in. I'm going to read this text message from work real quick. She is in for it, isn't she?
Yeah. And she doesn't know how many boogers I have today.
Me too.
The tissues are all the way over there, and I'm already like stuck behind this microphone and these headphones.
Oh, don't use your sleeve. All right, my X Appeal listeners, we have got Christy Bragg with us today to talk about something a little bit heavier than what we've been talking about. I'm just going to kind of give you some Christy's first bio that she's ever written about herself. So 10 years from now, and she's licensed and published, and we're crediting her with all these things, we can look back and go, we knew her when, right? So Christy Bragg is a smidge of an eclectic and often finds herself wearing multiple hats. She grew up in the Dallas-Fort Worth area and graduated from UTA with a bachelor's in social work, and is currently completing her master's in social work with a focus on mental health and substance abuse at the University of Texas in Arlington. She then plans to pursue her license as a clinical social worker. While she has interned at the Center of Addiction and Recovery Studies, she taught substance and preventative education to sixth graders, as well as facilitated social emotional learning programs with at-risk youth. In 2022, she collaborated with other professionals from the Stalking Prevention Awareness and Resource Center. God, Christy. No wonder. Okay, Christy also teaches swim lessons, and now I understand why. Is because she needs to like get centered in water and decompression, do something else, right? So she contributed to the national remodel of stalking policies. Well, that's kind of awesome. And she often finds herself working with uncomfortable topics such as trauma, sexual violence, substance abuse, suicide prevention. Okay. She also, this is long, which is impressive. And again, I now know why you teach swim lessons, but this one, I actually do love. She works with a nonprofit called Louder Than Silence, and is a survivor-led and peer-supported organization that provides long-term resources and care for survivors of sexual violence at no cost to them. And then, like you've heard me mention, she is a swim teacher. She has Matt as her husband, and she is an Uber mom to 5 kids that range from 8 to 25. So she is not busy at all. She has locked herself in her office, and Joey,
and exhausted. I'm so tired right now.
I was like, how do I stay eclectic? I do a lot of things. I have my hat in a lot of little spots. So you do, but you also exercise and keep your mind right. Because I know I've coached you through some classes. We've funny story about Christy. I was teaching her, Joey, a running class, and it's a sprint class, and they get up to about 15 miles an hour in these 15 seconds. I know, correct. It's like almost school zone speed, and they're sprinting, right? And so I'm timing it, and Christy's taking it with her daughter, and I look over, and it was like slow motion. Christy is running on a treadmill, and all of a sudden her feet come out from underneath her, and she's going down. Like the treadmill's running, and she's going down. Yeah. And I'm running. It all happened in slow motion because I'm like, she's going to fly over the banister into the lobby. I'm going to have to yell, someone catch her. And her daughter's just running, just do. And Christy braced her core, tucked her glutes, braced her core, and fell so elegantly onto the treadmill, and then rolled right off onto the floor. And I was, oh my God.
No, you didn't get hurt? You didn't break anything?
I didn't break anything. I did get a couple of, and then here's my advisory warning. Just clip in, just put the E on your shirt. You're still cool. My problem stopped doing the class with Ellie and doing it with my daughter. I was like, oh, she's going 7.5. Good 7.5. And I couldn't. And it's okay. I felt so bad. Miles an hour, Joey.
So 7.5 on the I do like a 3.0 is like my max speed on a treadmill. So
no, that's actually very good for you. It mimics EMDR. I'm going to throw something out. It mimics EMDR was designed, like trauma therapy was discovered through walking. So walking is so beneficial. We just think we have to kill ourselves on a treadmill at 7.5 when we really down.
we're just so worried. I was like, I broke her.
I know, that's
So I do not use that treadmill. I'll just say that that treadmill has bad vibes. Do not get on it. So, I mean, I use the treadmill, just not the second one. Yeah.
That's interesting that it was developed through walking.
Yeah.
I didn't know that.
Yeah. It was discovered by a psychologist.
That's crazy.
More people walk now, I feel like. There's a lot more,
Walking.
on walking. Yeah, for sure. For mental health.
It's a lot.
Yeah.
Well, it does make a big difference. And speaking of making a big difference, that is what you're doing through your current research and studies with being a grad student. But what we're here to talk about today is Christy and I were talking in the cafe, Joie, and I brought up the fact of our podcast. And then I started talking about how I had kids. And I don't think I told you this, Christy, because I was kind of saving it for your gut reaction on the podcast. When I shared with someone close to me, very close to me, that I was getting a divorce, their first reaction, the first thing that came out of their mouth, Joey, I don't think I've ever told you this either, was, congratulations, you're now raising drug addicts.
Oh,
and I was like, that it gives me chills to this day. That pissed me off.
yeah.
So badly that my kids were in the first and second grade.
Oh,
And all I could think about were these two innocent babies and someone now looking at them in that light,
right.
because I chose a better life for us to get out and get divorced. So kind of want to dig into that, because that is, I mean, I did a little bit, Joey's like, you're the research person. I did a little bit of research, and I found out that this was back in, I think it was pre-COVID, but 1.5 million kids a year deal with divorce. And I don't know if that's year over year or if that's just the same recycled number of divorced parents. Because
Since COVID, it's gone higher. Like, it's raised, obviously, because, you're confined in a space, right? And so we saw an increase of divorces post-COVID. Yeah, more kids.
But that's our subject matter today, is how to protect your babies against becoming drug addicts, and what the warning signs are and things like that. Because honestly, I mean, it struck a chord with me. I was like, I can't, they're in the first and second grade. Like, where are they even going to get access to this? What is going to turn them?
Well, nobody should ever let that leave their mouth, because there's a lot of myths in and around divorce. I haven't experienced divorce as far as my husband and I, but I was raised by a single mom. And so my mom was a powerful woman that, raised me, and was a divorced mom of 3 kids. And so when we start talking about risk factors or potential risk factors, that's just what they are, right? Like, it's just a potential, that there's a potential for this. It doesn't mean it has to be that way. And so it just baffles me that someone would, I don't know, have the audacity to say that. I think that that's part of the myth, though. It's like the way we view divorce. I think you guys said it in in 1 or 2. I'm like your 6th listener. And when you said we have 5 listeners, I was like, okay, number 6.
Thank you.
So good. It's so good, because whenever I navigated walking with a friend through divorce, I actually listened to divorce podcasts to be able to help in a beneficial way, because I didn't want to add anything to what she was already having to navigate. I didn't want to be that person that says something stupid like, hey, you're going to raise drug addicts. That's not the case. So whenever we start talking about risk factors, warnings, different things like that, we're just simply saying these are potential risk factors in this situation. And if you know what you're looking for, then you can adapt and make the changes that you need to make in order to best serve your kids, right, in this environment that you guys, or this situation that you guys are navigating.
That makes total sense. And I know that we kind of circled back when we were preparing for the podcast, and we talked about, some of the risk factors are that the parent getting divorced who has possession of the child or children is now more occupied with getting divorced and the process that is. And again, Joey, that's where you and I come in on our consulting side to help kind of take that hour and really focus so that you can go home and make sure that homework is done and there's enough food for lunch tomorrow and things like that. So I want to kind of dive into like less monitoring things, getting the kids involved in extracurricular activities, their friend influence, all the things that we've talked about. Christy, kind of go into some of that with us.
So as far as what you want to do is build positive barriers, right? You want to create space for building that resilience against those risk factors in kids. And so that can come in the form of sports. I'm actually doing research right now on building like how sports play such an important role as a deterrent. And again, with everything that you talk about, you're not saying this is absolute. You put your kid in soccer, they're not going to go, sniff Coke one day. What you're saying is, hey, I'm going to put them in these environments that's going to set an expectation for them. And then it's going to build healthy resilience. Now you have to have a good coach, right? If you have a jerk coach, well, they don't need that either. And so that's what my research is on, is this positive coaching influences that lead to positive outcomes. So that's what I'm looking at, because sports made such a huge difference in my life navigating that space. So that's why, right, you research the things that are of interest to you. Anyway, so developing those positive factors to offset the risk factors is what's important. So, and it also comes down to what you have access to, right? Because like someone's socioeconomic status over here looks completely different than someone over here. So I did social emotional learning and I did, presentations to at-risk kids. Well, those kids generally in the districts that I was in, they all fell at or below the poverty line. And so you're looking at their parents don't have money for football or for volleyball, which is why I'll tell, a public school system being right. They have access to some sort of physical activity.
Right. Or some kind of team to belong to.
Yeah. And then it depends on what state you're in, because, I reside in Texas. And so our social supports look completely different than if I lived in Washington or Boston, wherever. Texas looks completely different from social supports that would be supportive, have supportive measures for people navigating divorce or different, right? Like access to food, access to health insurance, just different things like that. So there's all these potential like exorbitant risk factors that are added in when you take in the economic factor that impacts the families that are navigating. If you go from 2 incomes to 1 income, mom, is working more to be able to offset the loss of that other income. What does that look like? Well, and I hate that one statistic where it's like, we're parental monitoring. Well, of course, because we don't have the social supports necessary, right, to be supportive in that space unless you have that built-in type community. But even Joey, great.
Well, that's true. And Joey,
you guys said, I'm sorry, like, well,
no, go ahead.
But you said where, you're, and I'm sure she's a great friend, but like where your friend's like, oh, you're raising drug addicts. Well, you're not going to go back to that person and be like, hey, can you create a meal train for me? Because I always joke, like, you don't get a meal train for divorce or sexual assault. Like, they're just not bringing you meals over that. But we should, right? Like, we should create a meal train or whatever for a family and drop off a pizza or whatever. Because you're in survival. It's trauma.
That's so true.
Yeah, it is true.
That's so true. Well, my question was going to be, Joey, do you go into that with your mediation with parents that are divorcing? Do y'all talk and dive into kids and sports and what they're allowed to be involved in? Or do you kind of leave that to their co-parenting after?
Yeah, that's more a co-parent.
Co-parenting after.
The only thing that we're talking about is how they're splitting the costs of activities and sports. So things like that. But yeah. But I mean, it comes up in conversation because one parent might think, well, he or she should be in sports. And the other parent's like, well, I don't feel like I have to pay for that because I don't feel like that's necessary. But there are, divorce coaching would help with that. And there's also co-parenting specialists that you can hire after your divorce to help you get through that as well and kind of come up with co-parenting solutions. But when you're saying sports too, are you advocating for sports because of the exercise or just any activity? Because some kids are just not into sports at all?
I'm just any activity.
Okay.
Right. So whatever it is. So if we think about self-care, and we think about, I don't know, I have a kid who loves to, like, there's not a sport bone in her body. She will paint though for hours on end.
Right.
And it's very calming and soothing to her. She's a fabulous artist. So whatever they're interested is, whatever that interest is, being able to kind of funnel them towards that. You know, do they love to read? Okay, an Audible subscription or a whatever cloud library is free. You know, check your public library system. You know, they can listen to books, or they can even rent books or check out books, you know, the digital or whatever. So it's kind of finding that interest that creates that space for them as they're navigating whatever it is that they're navigating.
And I found with my kids too, I mean, they both chose sports, but just the fact of them going somewhere and having structure, having a coach, because they don't always want to listen to your parents, but they'll listen to a coach, and just having somebody who gives you structure a couple days a week. It doesn't even have to be every single day. I think that makes a huge difference too for their minds to get
absolutely. Out. Well, so the dopamine release, like you're releasing I don't want to call them feel good hormones, because it's a myth, honestly, that it's a feel good hormone, but it's the dopamine release that they get. Because it's the same thing that's appealing about drugs, right? They get a dopamine hit. And so when they get the dopamine hit, all of a sudden this horrible or whatever, however difficult thing, it doesn't just have to be divorce. Whatever this is that they're navigating, all of a sudden they have this hit. And that feels good to the brain. And the brain is like, oh, I want more of that. And that's how addiction begins. Oh, I didn't have to think about it over here. I want more of it. I want more of this other feeling that felt good. So if you can hone in on those things that, release that dopamine in their brain, or release those hormones in their brain, to where they're able to find a release, it's going to be very beneficial. It's going to be a positive barrier. I call them positive barriers. It's going to create a positive barrier against the risk factors. Okay. And so what are some of those warning signs? Because for for anything, for drugs, depression, suicidal, like how, because I know, Joey, you're out of it, right? Like you're not out of it because you're always a parent, but your children are out of the house. 2 of them are.
No, they're all there. They come back.
Come back.
No one's ever out of the house, Mandy, just so you know.
Yeah. Damn it. They'll cycle back in. I'm not for you. What if I lived in Greece?
No, but they are. They are older, so they do express their feeling. They're 21 and 23, and then my 2 stepsons are 16 and 13, so they're in it. But I don't know that we're ever out of it. But yeah, no, it was rough there. It's worrisome every day, and I think for some of us, like you said, you have to work more or whatever it is to cover the costs of life. But sometimes you're going through this divorce and you're thinking in the back of your head, I'm just so nervous about them that I just want to give them whatever they want.
Right.
You want to go out later? Go out later. You want to go out and not do your homework? You don't want to go to school today? Okay, fine. Just please be okay. And that initially, that's your gut reaction, I think, as a mom, is to just let them do whatever. But then you have to pull back and be like, just like anyone else, they need structure. They need rules. They need a lot. Boundaries, like you talked about too. So I don't know how somebody gets past that at all. Not having that mama bear reaction to just give them whatever they want.
No, I'm guilty of it too. Mine comes with eating. I tend to let them snack. That is a control factor for me, because they couldn't drive and they couldn't stay out and they were little. So it's the one thing that really little kids want. They always want to eat. They always want to snack. And so that's my downfall, was always saying, yes, you can have something right before dinner, or yes, you can have a dessert, or no, you don't have to finish that plate of food, or no, you don't have to eat the chicken. But so that was my yes with the little kids.
was that, which is kicking me in the backside right now. Shouldn't have done it.
I think it's important to, and again, when you're navigating divorce, because we're talking about divorce, when you're navigating that, first of all, it's like a whole host of things. How is the parent? What are their coping skills? What is their social, emotional, what does their regulation look like? If they're having difficulty doing that, the kids, if you think about, there's something called attachment theory. So if they're younger, it's going to look completely different than if they're older, right? However, the way that they're going to pick up how to regulate that off of the parent, the primary parent that they're around. And so often, when people are navigating through divorce, they're not thinking about getting a coach. They're not thinking about getting a counselor or a therapist for the kids, or doing a divorce care program or any of those things. They start to think about those things, I think, when they begin to get some footing afterwards. That's why it's so important to actually consider those things during. I mean, it may feel like one more thing to put on your plate, but just from the research that I've read and just by what I know as far as friends, it's so important to have that coaching, right? Because you're having to rely on attorney, and you're paying that attorney to give you this, I don't know, snippet of advice. Well, pay somebody who can actually be there a little bit more.
So smart.
Yeah. As opposed to, well, let me pay, I don't know what their rates are. One of my friends paid several $100s an hour. And I'm like, I'll give you that advice for free. I'll give you that info for free. I'll go look this up and we'll, figure it out, because you shouldn't have to pay to ask that question. And so I think that's so important, is to be able to, before you have the need for it, because once you realize you have a need to get the kids in therapy because we see all these things happen, or whatever it may be, it's not that it's too late. It's you're getting a late start. So consider doing it, because leading up right to divorce, hey, this is going, before the paper is filed, okay, this is going in a direction that I work in abuse, so I can see divorce very much so as something that's beneficial, and creates a healthier environment for the spouse and the kids. And so, though, leading up to that, I'm probably going to need to do something about this. And it'll be helpful to the spouse or the parent. It'll be helpful for the kids.
It's preventative, I think, too, because I did exactly what you said. I didn't go into therapy until, I've been to therapy over the years, but I didn't go into weekly or biweekly until I was starting to get my footing, and I was already just so deep into, my anxiety. I already have anxiety anyway. So it got worse. And then I went to therapy. If I would only, and that's our hope with this podcast too, is that we reach women to say, okay, you're thinking about divorce, get a therapist right now, talk to somebody right now. And then, because you have to, if you're dealing with a narcissist, or you can't control how they react, but you can control how you react. So that's what therapy does. It helps you control your reactions and the way that you see things in your perspective. And speaking of that, you had mentioned something about how the kids almost see what you give is what they're seeing, and then they're going to feel that too. So for any parents listening that already have anxiety, or maybe have dealt with substance abuse in the past, and I know we have to go to warning signs, but this is just a side note. So let's just say for me, I'll use me as an example. I have panic disorder, OCD. I have a list of things that put me on the bathroom floor quite often myself. So when I have anxiety, and then you see your kids hurting, their anxiety's up, my anxiety goes up, and I have to work triple time to pull my anxiety down so they don't feel my anxiety. I don't even know what the question is, but for anybody who's listening, just knowing, like you said, I think getting ahead of it so you don't get to that point, because at some point you're thinking, is it is it me? Like, am I making a bigger deal out of this? And then you ask your kid and they're like, no, I'm fine. So you could kind of make yourself crazy too, going through it.
Oh, you totally can. And you get in your head and you get on that hamster wheel and the thoughts that keep you up at night. I know, Joey, I have anxiety as well. And for me, I've noticed that after and going through the divorce, my son and I are so connected that if I start to have an anxiety, if my morning when I have him, if my morning starts out anxious through text messages and it's 6:00 and I've already got 5 text messages to answer and all the things that come with just being a working mom. If I drop him off at school in an anxious state myself, he has a bad day. I end up getting a call from the school. Something happened with him because we're so connected. So I have to find a way to calm myself because I want to be on the bathroom floor too. But I have to find a way to calm myself when I have him for his day. Because if I have a good day, he has a good day. If I'm running rampant, it blows up for him. And I think that's so true, is that we do need to get centered and find out what works for us, because it mimics down to them. And it's scary.
I mean, not that we're blaming us if they do go on drugs, right?
Oh, no.
Oh, okay. I was going to say, wait a second. Hold on. What am I doing to myself here?
Yeah. See, now I'm going to get a call from Joey later today. We watch.
What did I do? What did I do?
I think we're going to do that, parents anyways. Like, oh crap, what have I done? What did I do?
Especially as your kids get older, there's times where I've gone back to him and said, I am so sorry for this. And if you're screwed up a little bit, just, could you forgive me? I'm acknowledging that, this was a hard phase, and, could you have some grace for me? So yeah. And it doesn't have to be divorce either. I mean, it could be any parents listening right now that just it's ups and downs when you have kids. It's so difficult.
Yeah. But and they want dinner every night. Oh. Okay. Going back.
They're going to eat. Yeah.
All the time.
I'm like, there's cereal in the cupboard. Just go get some cereal.
Right. I'm too tired tonight to think about it. And do talk to us about some warning signs, though, because I know that I'm kind of at the bridge of that. Middle school going, my bonus daughter is in high school, and then our school system does it differently. It's divided into twos. So 5th and 6th grade are together. That's where my daughter is. 7th and 8th grade are together. That's where my son is. 9th and 10th are together, and that's where Brandon's daughter is. And then juniors and seniors are together. So we're kind of at this split, but I know it's coming. I know it's coming. And now you got to worry about it arriving in different forms. Like now I think I don't think it's just, they don't just smoke marijuana. Like it's vaping. It's vaping, or it's the gummies. Like it's chewable, and it's what we've given our children as vitamins forever. So it looks familiar. Yeah. Look at Joey. Joey's like, I don't understand.
I mean, fentanyl, right? Like there's, out of drugs. And I said to you guys, y'all can post it on your thing if you want to. It's like from the DEA, like the emoji doc that shows how kids communicate about drugs. So
they'll for sure find a way to post that.
Emojis, when they're communicating about it, because if a parent opens that up, they're not going to know, that like a blue heart means something, or it's like a piece of bread or something like that. So, I think first, just with the phase that, you're going in so many, first, there's a book, called The Teenage Brain. Maybe it's called The Teenage Brain. Highly recommend that book, because not only are you navigating just everything that's happening in the teenage brain at that point in time, for anybody, but when you add the risk factors on top of that, that's when you see the increase in the warnings. So anytime you add a risk factor, whatever it may be, then you're increasing the risk. It doesn't mean it's going to happen. It just means, this is a risk that we need to be aware of, so that we can address it. So some of those behaviors, mood changes. So you can have, I'll also say this, you can have a host of behaviors, and maybe you have like one of those behaviors, or you maybe see two. It's when you see co-occurring behaviors. So you're seeing more than one. Because mood changes, my gosh, my 14-year-old, it's like those memes where they're walking in and she's like, hey, you want to get up? It's a good day. And they're trying to wake up the teenage daughter and she's like, what? That's a real thing. Like, because they're navigating all these hormone changes. And so some of it's going to come back down to genetics. How are your kids, predisposition. I'm like, why does this word not want to come out? But they're, what are the things that have occurred in the past? Parents, parents have anxiety. Do the kids already have a presence of some form of low grade anxiety there? And so that's why it's important or depression. There can be situational depression, which is different than, full blown depression. And so, when you start to observe mood changes, withdrawing, isolation, irritability, let me think here. The defensiveness, flare ups, they're getting upset. Maybe they're playing and the friend takes the toy. You can make this for young kids or adolescents. So it can look very, very different. But when you start to see some of these different mood changes, just, make a mental note, start paying attention to it. You can look for academic issues. Have they gone from being an A student to a C student, or from caring about getting their work done, doing a good job for them versus not really caring anymore? Are their friendship groups changing? And so when you begin to see multiple changes, it's not saying that you have an issue, but it is saying, hey, we need to take a look at this and see how we can address that. And part of that is having that open communication with your kids. So if I'm doing the no-nos of being a single parent and I'm bad-mouthing my spouse, like some of the different things that can occur if I'm not being able to emotionally regulate myself, if I'm spinning out myself, well, that may create a barrier from that child coming forward and having that open communication with you, because they might be concerned, I can't give mom anything else. Like I can't put one more thing on her plate. And so that's why it's so important to have some of that structure, for oneself when they're navigating through divorce, so that you create a safe place for that child or teen. The teen's going to come in at like 12:30 at night. You're going to be tired and you're going to be like, why are you sitting in my bed and you want to talk to me? The 8-year-old is going to do it on the way to school or, all day. Mine won't be quiet. And so, it's going to look different in different spaces. And so creating that safe place for your kids to be able to engage and talk with you about whatever's troubling them. And it may start off one way and then spin into something entirely different. Like the conversation might be talking about friends, and then it spins into maybe something they've overheard or whatever it may be. And then it's having a listening ear to be able to address and ask open-ended questions. So you're not asking yes or no questions. You're asking open-ended question. How did that make you feel? Oh, what was your thought on that? Like allow them to create and practice that tool. Like I call it a tool. I try to do it with my kids, like practice saying how they think about something. They don't have to think like mom thinks or dad thinks. How they feel about something, there's no wrong feeling. And so creating that space for them to begin to open up. They may not do it the first several times, but over time, they might. And so I think that that's huge. And then in creating that space, if you discover alcohol, I think is a big like social football, because they have such ease of access to alcohol, because culturally we look at alcohol and we don't think of it as a substance.
we think of it as an adult drink. But oftentimes, if they begin, like statistically, if they begin either smoking or vaping or alcohol, before the 6th grade, which is why I did presentations to 6th grade students. So if they start that, they are statistically at higher risk for using harder drugs. So if a kid vape or starts smoking, they're at a higher risk to try marijuana. They're at a higher risk of trying harder substances because at some point, the neurobiology that occurs in the brain, that original dopamine hit that happens with cigarette use, right? So we're not going to think about cigarette use being an illegal substance because it's legal. And so, but that cigarette use, there is a dopamine hit. And so when that dopamine hit occurs, well, then at some point the brain's going to acclimate to that. And then they're going to need more and more, right? So like when someone first started smoking a cigarette, it was a cigarette. But then as they continued to smoke, it was more and more and more. They needed more and more and more to get that feeling, right? Their brain needed more and more and more to get that feeling to even out. Same thing we're saying. Same thing with, vaping. Vaping hits it a little bit faster, because it's vape. So, yeah.
I want to, that's a lot.
That is a lot. Sorry.
Yeah. No, that's a lot, but it's good to know. I mean, I know it does make sense. And it's something that is so scary. It's so heavy.
Yeah. And think about it this way too. Like, not everybody who tries alcohol is going to become addicted to alcohol. Not everyone who tries a cigarette is going to become addicted to nicotine. Not everyone who tries drugs are going to become addicted to drugs. Some of that comes like literally in your genetics, right? Right. Disposition towards addiction. And I view in most of the health professionals that I follow or have heard from, addiction is a disease. So it's, we used to think of it as like in the 80s, it was, it's a choice to have that drink. Well, not when it's not a choice when it's evening out the brain chemistry and all of a sudden you're in a relaxed state from having that one drink. Now it does increase your anxiety. You just don't realize it, right? Because you have the first part that kind of relaxes you. And so addiction it's not that everybody who does it is going to become addicted. So you don't ever want to freak out if your kid said, oh, I tried this. I would be curious. I think that's like, if you can take anything away from what I say or share, like be curious. What was behind that? How did that make you feel when you tried that? What was going on? What were you thinking about? And be curious about why they're turning to something, to get whatever effect they're trying to get.
And I think that, from experience, you have to ask those type of questions when they're in a fairly good mood.
Yeah.
Because otherwise you're just a pain in their ass. Yeah. They don't want to tell you anything. No,
they will shut down.
Yeah.
Yeah.
It's so true. And I also have, told my children that now that they do have phones, unfortunately, that if they ever want to do the mean mom, like if you need me to go mean mom on you so that I get you out of an uncomfortable situation, I'm okay with that. And you're okay with that because you asked, not that I'm going to go crazy, but you asked for me to step in. And I'm going to do that because I'm going to protect you, whether you're with your father or you're with me. If you text me, I need out of this, Mom, I don't feel comfortable. Like, I hate it now that I don't have them every other month or every other week because I get texts from moms, hey, can she spend the night? And I'm like, well, let me ask her because I'm not going to answer for her. I need to ask. And so I do that. But there was something else. So I love that. And it's a lot. And I think also getting a community involved. I know that I'm very close with my daughter's principal. And I got a call from her one day and she's like, hey, Case is acting up. What do you mean she's acting up? Well, she's tardy to classes. She's gotten a couple of tardies. I've seen her in the office a little bit. And I've noticed that her friend group has changed. And the principal is someone that I went to school with and very,
close growing up. So she can be that candid with me. I hope she can be that candid with other parents, because I think other parents need the same level. And I told her, I said, does she have classes with this friend group that she's hanging out with? And she goes, she does. I go, change your schedule. Change your schedule. Put it on the community. Mom doesn't always have to be the bad one. Dad doesn't always have to be the bad one. Get a level of community that cares about your children, because they do. Yeah. And have them step in as well. Because all of a sudden, Mom, my schedule changed. Oh, it did? Oh, that sucks. Man, who's your new science teacher? You know, hate that. But it got her back on track.
Yeah.
It got her away. And so I think, not that, you know, Joey and I talked about this earlier when we were talking about the celebrities, not that everybody has to know your situation, but the more people that know, the more eyes you have on your kids.
Yeah.
In a good way.
Yes.
Right? Because you can go in and say, hey, listen, I'm going to court again and they need a little extra love. And you call the counselor and the counselor calls them in. That's free counseling for your kids, you know, and then the school knows what's going on, so that if they do have a bad day or act out or get caught with something, there's a why behind it. And people need to know, rather than the kid having to defend themselves and get frustrated. The school already knows. And they just want to do a mental check-in with the people that you love the most. Right. But going down that road too, Christy, what are some of the ways to ensure that positive outcomes? Because not every kid ends up being a drug addict. Right. And there are resilient children that come out of being raised by single parents or being raised by parents of divorce. So how do we embrace those positive outcomes for the kids?
So how do you embrace the positive outcomes?
How do we like lay it out, like ensure that they've got some kind of positivity coming in the midst of what Joey and I call the shit tornado, in the midst of the shit tornado? Like, how do we make sure that some of those positive tornado?
I think you celebrate the small things, right? Like if you can alleviate, so anytime you navigate, I call everything trauma, or not, but I do. So anytime you navigate a traumatic experience or a difficult experience, change that uncertainty, especially like in the space of divorce. I'm thinking, when I say this, I'm saying it as like how I remembered as a kid. There was so much uncertainty. And so the things that my mom was able to remain consistent in was so helpful, because then it builds back in that security of like, oh, I'm not going to be kind of flailing in the wind. If you feel like you're flailing in the wind, your kids are going to feel like they're flailing, right? Or if you feel like you're in the shit tornado, they're going to feel it a little bit too. And so, focusing on those positive factors. So, you know, having consistency in the things that you can be consistent in. Talk about change. Talk about, hey, this is actually a healthy change. So I don't like to say good and bad. I talk about like, oh, this is a healthy benefit for us, or this is a negative benefit for us. Because when you start to look at it in, or positive and negative, or healthy and unhealthy, when you talk about it in those terms, then you're not putting the bad on them. Like I remember teaching in a class one time, and a kid's parent, you know, did marijuana, and he's like, so is it bad? And, you know, kids, sixth graders will ask you anything. And I thought, and that's when it first occurred to me, gosh, if I say this is bad, he's going to walk away from this going, she called my parent bad. And I'm like, no, people deal with things differently. And sometimes we find things that are unhealthy for us to help us cope. And so we've got to be able to find the things that are healthy for us that help us cope, right? So change their trajectory of whatever it may be. I'm trying to think. So the structure, being supportive, those open-ended questions, I think that's so huge, is being able to have that communication. If you don't know how, there have been times, I mean, I've got 5 kids. There have been times where I'm like, crap, I suck at communication. And so read a book on it, or like what you guys do to coaching, like have someone who you feel like you have respect for,
to help you out with that. Hey, what are some different ways that I can address this? How can I empower my kid? How can I give my kid some autonomy over some decisions and give them some of the control back? Because it is a chaotic space to try to navigate as a kid, you know, because there is so much change. Oftentimes there's a move, sometimes there's not, but oftentimes there's a move involved. And so then you've got a change of location and a million other factors that come in that we would be here for hours if we talked about all the things that are in the shitstorm.
All the things, so many things. Yeah. I noticed with my kids, so I guess it's very difficult because nobody wants to talk about divorce. Parents don't want to talk about it with other parents. Adults don't talk about it. They kind of talk about it once it's either they're going through it or it's done. And kids, same thing. No one's walking around the playground saying, are your parents divorced? Because my parents are getting a divorce. But my daughter did kind of accept it more when she found out how many of her friends have parents that are divorced. It almost became normal to her. And she was like, oh, okay, I'm not the only person. They feel very alone. So that was one thing. And the other thing that happened was we moved a lot. And you were talking about that kind of unstable feeling. And my friend, Stacy, I'll just call her name. She was raised by a single mom. And she said the one thing that we did too much of was move. And so she came over to my apartment that first time and she's like, we need to make this a house like right away, because that made, that stuck out in her childhood was moving. And so I was kind of conscious about that. But I do think, like you were saying, getting help is probably the best thing anyone can do right now, just in general. But there's a person, just so everybody knows, there's a person for literally everything. There is a professional out there that has, whether it's a therapist or, like we said, a co-parenting specialist. Yes, that's a thing. Like, just like when we talk about divorce, like a lot of people don't even know a mediator is a thing. A lot of people don't know that there's certified divorce financial advisors. Like, you just think financial advisor, but there's a specific one for divorce. There's so many people out there that you can find, and we have that just by Google or by us. So the fact that there's so many resources out now that can help us and our kids. It's awesome. Yeah. You have to do your homework. That's all.
There's I put it on the thing. There's a divorce parenting online course. It's peer reviewed and research, and it's through Arizona State University. And it's a class, and it ranges, I think, between $49 and $69. And I'm not affiliated with that in any way, shape, or form. But they have shown statistically that people who go through this course designed in particular for parents who are navigating divorce, that they have better outcomes. And so there's always something, right? Like what you were saying, a Google search away and you'll find it. I love what you said about moving. I moved out a lot also. And I was reading in a book. I'm always reading a book. I was reading in a book and they were saying, with every single move is an increased risk, because depending on what the move is, a risk factor for a kid, just from an academic perspective, because if they're going from a district to a district, they're having to get new friends, all of those different things. And they're not able to create some of those connections that they need to connect at that point in time. So I had never considered that until, I read it in an article. And then I was like, oh my goodness, I read so much. I'm like, this explains so much. The aha moment every time. I feel like every time I read something, I'm like, oh, that's why that's why I'm there. Yeah.
And sometimes you can't help it. Oh, sorry. Did I yell at you, Mandy? Oh, did I? No. You jumped back. Sometimes you can't help but move. I mean, usually it's financial. Yeah.
Oh yeah.
Yeah. So it's not a bad thing if you have to move, but it's definitely not. Who likes to move anyway? Correct. It's the worst. For a while there, we were moving at the holidays. And so I wouldn't I'd rush to put up the Christmas decorations. And I think this year it bit me in the butt because not one of our Christmas trees are decorated. Like, they're up, but nobody had the gusto to go, let's put the ornaments up this year. So they're lit. But I think that's what bit me in the butt, is they're like, Mom,
well, and
we're not decorating. I want to stress too, like I've worked in the DV, domestic violence, sexual violence space with lower income persons. And so definitely not trying to say, oh, just you need to stay put, don't move, for your children's sake. Like right. If we take an ACEs, I don't know if y'all have ever heard of an ACE score. It's the trauma score. Oh, Google it. It's fun. So you take an ACE score. It's your adverse childhood experiences. So divorce is one of those on there. And so if you take that ACE score, that kind of gives you an idea of what you're working from, as far as traumatic experiences in your own childhood. Right. And so then you can kind of glance at it and, do it for your own kids. You don't need to tell your kids, but you can kind of do it for your own kids and take a look and go, okay, we have this and we have this and we have this. All right. And if you have more than, I'd say 3, like if it's available to you, and if it's low income, people who find themselves in a social economic status that, where they don't have $150 to go to their therapist. Generally, if you'll Google search programs in and around your local area, your rural, it's a little bit sketchier, but in your local area, oftentimes you will find programs that have therapy for kids. Sexual violence. There's a program. I mean, there's tons of nonprofits that provide therapeutic services. There's DV, domestic violence. I mean, Genesis House in Dallas. Safe Haven in Arlington. I mean, there's organizations. Just kind of Google and see what you have available. And it's not like a fun parade to go to those places. But I do remember, mentioning to a friend, like, hey, reach out to this in Fort Worth. It was one safe place. They have everything under, one building. And I was like, just reach out. And so she reached out. And so they did online therapy, at no cost to her.
So nice.
I think they started oftentimes in groups because sometimes it's better. It's not great to do individual. Like if you're doing it in a group, you're there with other people who are navigating the same thing. And so it looks very, very different. And so not being limited by lack of resource, and be willing to kind of check and see what is available. If I can remember the one website that kind of lists everybody in a certain area for any like hospitals, whatever it may be, I'll send it to you, because it's a helpful resource to have, or find what's in your area.
I wonder too with teens, especially, I know that it's very difficult to get them to go to therapy. And the therapists that we went to said, well, if they're not going to talk in therapy, then there's no point in you can't force a teen to go to therapy. So I wonder when it stood out in my mind when you said a group, because at least they can go to a group and not say anything the first couple sessions. And then maybe they start to say, oh, wow, these people are not alone. Yeah. And then maybe they'll open out. So I love that. And I was thinking in my head, I wonder if they do online, and you said online,
especially since, post COVID, I mean,
right.
If you're not able to pop online, you're limiting yourself.
Yeah.
But yeah, definitely with adolescents, if you can find that group connection. I don't know what's going on if y'all can hear that, but, fix the battery. But if you can find that group connection, it's huge. We navigated something entirely different, but it took us through the court systems and different things like that. And, I remember the therapist saying to me, she comes in, she doesn't say anything, like, you're just paying me for her not to talk. And I was like, yeah, but I feel better about it. But I feel better.
Right. It helps you.
It helps me now that it's not me. Yeah, I totally screwed it up. And so it made a big difference, for her for this kid to get involved in a group and be able to, because after a while, you do have those people that I'd call them oversharers. Like I'm ADHD, so I'm an oversharer that I have to like tail it back. And so if you have those oversharers, well, they're over there oversharing. Then you have your kid who's more introverted, and then all of a sudden they're sharing. And so it just makes a huge difference. I'm like, unplug it, guys.
I vaguely hear it. What is it?
Okay. I think it's like a smoke detector. Our house is going to burn down.
Oh, that's hilarious.
Well, don't go until we're done. It's winter here. We've got 4 days of winter. So,
right. apparently that thing is going off. But yeah, I mean, it just makes a huge difference. Where I'll be doing my clinical practice this spring, you know, she's wanting to do stuff with group adolescents. And so she's done girl groups and different things like that, kids or adolescents, teens. And so I'm looking forward to that group dynamic. Cause I think it's beneficial, especially when you try to get them one-on-one. They don't want to talk. Yeah. No. Amazing. Yeah. I mean, really great insight. And I was looking down because I was looking at your notes. That emoji, we need to share that, Joie. That is did you look at that too? It's a huge wealth of knowledge. Yeah. Also, SAMHSA, I call it SAMHSA. So SAMHSA. It's the Substance Abuse Mental Health Services Admin. And you can put that in and then Google search anything and everything you're thinking of. And I guarantee you it will populate some sort of research that you can read through.
Go look.
Anything that you read, just kind of like, okay, does this apply to me? I mean, well, yeah. And you need to educate yourself because in my situation, I don't have my kids all the time. So what do I need to know, or what do parents need to know when their children are away from them? Not that I don't trust their father. I had children with their father. I do trust him with them. I don't trust them. I don't trust the kids because they don't know what they don't know, you know, but this has been a wealth of knowledge. Thank you. And I'm sure we could go on for,
I could keep going. I know. Cause it's all, and as a parent, you feel like you should just know this stuff instinctively, but there's so many different things to navigate and it's always changing. We'll put all that information. We could put those in the show notes on YouTube. Yeah. And then whatever links we can put in. And then hopefully maybe anyone who listens or watches, maybe they have some questions, comments, that they have too, to kind of share together. Cause we're all definitely going through this. We're in it together.
And it's definitely not exhaustive, right? Like what we spoke about it's not an exhaustive list. Like the list is huge.
Right. It's extensive.
Yeah. But I think the biggest protective factor that you can have in regards to substances, you know, adolescents turning to substances is starting that pre-work, that interventive work, you know, beforehand, if you're able. And then afterwards, treatment. I mean, there are great treatment centers. It's not the end all. It's just every time they go into a treatment center, it's the change cycle. You know, it may take a couple of times. It generally does not actually statistically work the first time.
Right.
And it's because it's not a will thing. It's a brain thing, right? Your brain just plays such a key component in that neurobiology. And so, yeah, I mean, so there's definitely hope. And I don't think anyone should look at this and go, I think you can look at it and go, okay, now that I'm aware of this, I want to approach this differently. Like we've been doing this. Hey guys, I think we're going to take a shift here and we're going to do this because, you know, I'm for you guys and I want to, you know, we're going to put some protective factors around us to protect you guys.
You love that.
Yeah. So
always good wording. Yeah. And not be afraid of have the conversation. And even if they're a little standoffish at first, you can kind of massage it in later on maybe or something, but always have.
Absolutely.
Yeah. Communication is key for anything, for your kids, your relationships, through a divorce, the whole thing. So,
and being direct. So be direct in your communication. Like I worked in suicidality. And so in suicidality, it's a direct question. Are you harming yourself and do you have a plan? You're not going to make them think, oh, I should get a plan and I should harm myself. There's a difference in intent and someone who has a plan to do it. And so recognizing those things, because sometimes that can accommodate, or that can join hands with depression and everything else, the risk factors that kids are navigating if they're using substances. And so absolutely conversation, because oftentimes it's a relief that whatever behavior they're exhibiting, you're now recognizing and going, I think there's a problem. And I love you so much. Like I'm seeing these things. Are you planning on harming yourself? Yeah. And, you know, whatever response you get,
go, oh shit, in your head, and then go, okay, how do we address this?
Mm-hmm.
Right.
And we're losing too. I mean, this is a whole other podcast. I've seen some friends lose their kids, and it's heartbreaking. It's and it's no blame to the parent at all, because I know she did absolutely everything she could. It's just it's hard. But thank you for coming on with such a heavy subject and being so well knowledged. And I love the fact
enough to make it be like, it's not that bad.
No, you're perfect. And I just want to say thank you. And thank you for doing the work that you're doing, because it takes people like you to help us off the bathroom floor
And to teach. Y'all are doing.
Yeah.
Because I told Mandy, I'm going to add you to my playlist because it's so, I know, I'll be your first playlister. I mean, it's so important, the information that you're giving, to be able to navigate that well alongside a friend and not in a way that causes more harm. I think is key. I did not know that divorce coaching was a thing until I listened to you guys. So I had no idea that, and I literally sent her y'all's podcast and was like, oh my gosh, girl, you should have had a divorce coach. Like, what were we doing? And so I think it's so vital, and y'all are doing some really good work. So keep it up. Yeah.
Thank you. Same. Yeah. It was awesome having you. Thank you. And it was such short notice. So thank you for rearranging your day. I don't want to keep you any longer because I know you've got something going on in the house. That apparently to fit into a smoke detector. So,
well, we'll have to bring her back too, Mandy.
Yes. Oh, for sure.
I feel like we just touched on one small subject.
It's like
with this scratch. And that's how it is in mental health and substance use. It's always going to just be a little bitty scratch.
Okay. But yeah, we'll bring you back on to dive into some other stuff, because it's so helpful and comforting to know that you're not on that hamster wheel by yourself. Thinking of all these things. And yeah. Awesome. Well, thank you, Christy, so much.
Good, Christy. We'll talk soon for sure. We're getting in touch. We'll be calling Christy every day.
Every day. She's going to change your phone number.
Yeah.
It's like, I'm out.
Enough of you two. That's enough. So I sadly love those. I loved this space. And so that's, So you'll answer. Okay. Got it. You just committed. All right, Christy, thank you so much.
Thank you so much, Christy.
I appreciate it. Thank you all.
All right.
Bye. Bye. Okay, guys. So if you're still here, that means you are at the end of this podcast. Yet another one, Mandy.
Another one. We got it. I got this down.
Yeah, we're so good. And we got our 6th listener. She was a guest and a listener. So
love it.
If you're still here, we would love for you to join the conversation over on our Instagram at my_xappeal on Instagram. You can leave us a message. If you want any of this information directly from us, we'll give it to you. Just send us a message or look on the show notes in our YouTube page. So you can head over to YouTube as well. Comment. Give us some information too. Maybe people want to share with us what they've learned over the years. We'd love to hear it. So we will see you next time on My Ex Appeal. Yeah.
Have a great week, y'all.
Thanks to our listeners, sponsors, and our lawyers on My Ex Appeal and Everything Divorce Podcast.